Welcome to Warehouse Automation Matters. I'm your host, Mary Hart, and I am joined today by Jim Shaw, President and co-founder, and Chip Steffey, Director of Sales from Zion Solutions Group, to talk about what it really takes to design warehouse operations for flexibility when demand keeps changing. Welcome to the show, Jim and Chip. Jim, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, and then Chip as well?
Absolutely, Mary. Thank you for having us. Number one, we always like to spend time with Locust and you. And so thanks for having us back. And I'm Jim Shaw. I live in central Kentucky, if you can't tell from my accent. And this is all I've ever done, Mary. I've been in this industry for almost 3 decades. I'm an industrial engineer, got a lot of background in this industry. And I'm looking forward to talking about today's topics.
Fantastic. How about you, Chip?
Yep. So Chip Steffey. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. Born and raised. Never lived anywhere else in my life. Most of my history is in the 3PL space. So I did a lot of engineering work in the 3PL world, for all the way from solutions to implementations to continuous improvement and ongoing customer support. And my family's big into sports. We like to get out, have a little fun, do a little coaching, and be outside as much as possible. So I appreciate you having us on here, and excited to see where we go.
Thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it. So let's get to it. When you look across the warehouse operations that you're advising today, what's changing most in terms of order profiles and demand patterns that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Call it the COVID bubble, pulled up e-com, and everything accelerated. I think 5 years ahead of schedule, and everyone's busting at the seams from a throughput and from a storage standpoint as they were trying to get inventory back into the warehouses after COVID. And now we're starting to see a little bit shift, maybe a little bit more back to the B2B side of things. So it's kind of ever evolving, I guess is the way to say it, right? We continue to see that our customers deal with their customers having smaller back end warehouses or storage areas in their locations. And so it's putting on a continual push from a unit standpoint and picking standpoint to be able to execute and be more reactive to when they need inventory because they're not holding as much in their warehouse. And so that's probably the main shift we still continue to see. And that's across really all sectors from a retail standpoint, from an automotive standpoint, even some of our healthcare customers, again, seeing these continual reorder because those companies, their customers want to use their footprint for processing, assembly, manufacturing, things that add value versus storing goods. They're putting that back on our customers to figure that part out. That's a continued evolution we see, and something that we have to continue to plan for as we move forward.
Sounds good. So, are you seeing variability as episodic like peak season, or are you seeing more of an ever peak that I'm hearing from people where you just can't plan for anything these days because peak is always there?
Yeah, I'll tell you what's interesting about that is, for years everybody waited for the Black Friday on the retail piece, right? The retailers realize it's expensive to build for 5 days a week when the other 360 days a year, you're not using the throughput and the automation around that, right? And so, more of what we're seeing is the retailers have finally been able to train the customers that, hey, we actually, our sales, when we put them out end of October, November 1, and say these are the Black Friday deals, they're the actual Black Friday deals. So we're starting, to your point, see more of that longer peak period through end of October and November for retailers. We're also seeing retailers kind of relax a little bit on peak reactiveness. For a long time, everybody knew the Amazon effect. You got 1 to 2 days to get it to their house, or you're not keeping up with Amazon, so I'm going to just buy it from Amazon because they can. you know, Amazon's kind of relaxed the way they've really stressed that 2 day window, which allowed other brands and retailers to relax their 2 day window. And so we're seeing a lot more of that smoothing out and more, hey, we'll get it to you quick. Just might not be that 1 to 2 day turnaround that the expectation was set 5, 6 years ago.
I'd like to plug in one on both these two questions. I think it's Chip definitely hit it. So the industry in the last 5 to 7 years has really shifted away from everybody's planning for that peak week. That used to be you had to do all of your buying. You had to do, you get through quarter 4, you come out in quarter 1. What do we do differently? We've got to buy by quarter 3. The integrators have to have it built by quarter, have everything signed. You better start building by Q3 so you can hit that Q4 and get through that Cyber Monday and Black Friday. I think it's really shifted away from that. And back to the first item is what's changing. I would just flip it around and say, what's not changing? The industry we've navigated the last 5 years, but specifically the last two with tariffs and just the inability to spend capital, the unwillingness to spend capital. It's been unique. I've started out with, I've been in this industry a long time, and it's been a unique last 2 to 3 year cycle in terms of what's changing. And so I think it's something different every quarter. You've got to be flexible, and I think that's what our partners and certainly probably Locus is looking at is our ability to be flexible. Has just you better be flexible, or you're not going to be able to play in this game anymore.
And that definitely is true from what I'm hearing, that nothing is going to be stable anymore. Warehouses had all these operational assumptions that used to hold true that are now breaking down. So let's talk about that. When a warehouse goes live today, how often is it still aligned with the demand assumptions it was designed around? Like, are they building for Easter Sunday, but they only have, the regular church going services?
Yeah. I would say the kind of to the funny point what Jim was hitting on, right? So a lot of we walk in a lot of warehouses that were built for those peaks that don't see those peaks anymore, right? So they have a lot of additional capacity and throughput capabilities that just aren't needed. I think kind of our current deployments that we've been working with and partners around that is it's getting a little bit more accurate to that point, and it really depends on the maturity of that customer's business, right? Are they still starting out at e-com and eventually going to go to wholesale and retail to continue to their growth, even though they started as an e-com company? So it really depends on where they're at in their, call it, life cycle of a business. The other thing we always try to educate or ask very directly with our customers is what are y'all going to be, right, when you grow up? You could start in this one product group and hammer it and become the best at it. But if you want to continue to grow, where do you see yourself expanding? What would that product mix look like? What is the size of that product mix? So that we can account for it and build that into your year 5 roadmap of a automation or design standpoint. Because the last thing we want to do is install anything that would eventually have to be ripped out before you really get the value out of it. And that's something we put a lot of emphasis on is what does the growth look like? How's it going to grow? And then how do we start here, but it still allow you to hit those end games in an efficient manner without interrupting your operation while we grow it.
Yeah. And I would just add, I think it's industry specific, Mary. So with the retail, the direct to consumer, the e-com, let's call it that, and wholesale even too, it's so easy to shift your business model today from what it used to be a decade ago. So you can start with just a direct to consumer model and you can quickly go into brick and mortar stores. And so there are two different businesses. You can start with a women's shapewear and you can evolve into men's, fill in the blank. And so I think in those industries, it's way more fluid. In some of the other industries that we're servicing, manufacturing and more medical and healthcare, it's a little more stable in terms of how you're designing. It's really talking about growth and the product roadmap and how many SKUs you're going to add to it. But the wild, wild west is the retail. The wild, wild west is the e-com. And so understanding that and having flexibility built in, I think is critical for our customer success. And at least that's what Chip and I are seeing.
So you talked about the wild, wild west. What are you hearing from your customers or that you're seeing in warehouses yourself about the labor availability? Is that still an issue that you're seeing out there? And how are your customers handling that?
Yeah, I'll go with this one, Chip, and start, and then you can back me up. So I think it's less of a conversation than it used to be, but it's still a conversation. Labor is still the largest portion of a P&L in 3PLs and the warehouse and distribution space. It's not the largest portion, I'm sorry, outside of transportation. Transportation by far and away, the freight and the shipping and handling is your biggest line item on a P&L, but then next it's labor. And then it's where's your labor still at? Labor's still at picking. So the industry's been trying to solve picking and make it more efficient and more scalable and less relying on bringing people in and training it, which is what Locus, I think, does a fantastic job with. The ability to come in and use your all's product in a quick manner and the training that it takes to get there, it's fantastic. But it's still a conversation. Labor is still an issue. It's just probably not the hottest topic. The bigger topic is how flexible can I be? How can I leverage my capital? How can I drive a return on investment? And ultimately, where's my product roadmap going? Those are more conversations that we're seeing when we're sitting down with the decision makers and C-suite.
Yeah, and I would say it's changed more in the type of labor, right? So What we've seen with technology, especially as Jim was hitting on from the locust front on how quick you can train, how quick you can learn what to do, where to go, what to pick. It's kind of de-skilled more of that warehouse activity. There used to be a huge onus on knowing you got Bob in the back who knows where every part is and can route you depth this aisle 3 locations over. Where now you don't need him around for 25, 30 plus years, right? You can be a little bit more nimble in your workforce between permanent employees, temp employees. How do you react to the volume changes and shifts that you see? Again, because of technology's development and how easy it is to train and get them up to speed quickly on one end. And then on the other end, it's put a lot more emphasis on skilled labor from a technology software standpoint, right? So you kind of got more, we used to have this middle ground of just really good, solid employees who knew what they do, had long tenure, workforce you really trust for a long time. But because of technology and the way, again, your all system and others have helped make it easier, we're seeing a little bit shifter of more simplified jobs and more sophisticated jobs, kind of getting out of that middle gap from a labor standpoint.
So let's talk about the layouts of a facility and how it's designed. What are the first signs that a warehouse layout has become too rigid for its current volume or its order variability?
Yeah. Usually the very first thing is you see one area hammered and the other one's dry, right? So it's usually pretty obvious where you walk in. One of my favorites is, a lot of warehouses now have motion sensor lights that they're conserving energy and all that, right? And one area is on, the other area is completely dark, even though it has conveyor and everything else going on to it, or some other type of system. And like, hey guys, what happened there? Oh, well, we built that for a case pick and sort, and we're doing all unit level picks, so we barely even see that area light up anymore, right? So it's interesting to see those little telltale signs. Or I always like to say, you always joke about old inventory. You got dust on boxes. Well, you got dust on conveyor and stuff too, because no one's there cleaning it because there ain't nothing going on over there. There's usually some quick telltale signs of, hey, this volume has shifted from what we originally planned. And really, I think to the point is, how do we design warehouses and operations to where we can adjust and reuse those assets still, even if you see a volume shift, you're still getting value out of that investment you made. And that's some of the unique puzzles we get to try to put together with our customers. But it's usually pretty obvious when you see, hey, this, you're not doing the same thing you built this for a couple years ago.
I'm gonna give a couple of specific cheats, Mary. You can walk in. Chip and I are industrial engineers at Hart. We supported operations for continuous improvement. Some people call it steady state. When you walk in and see a warehouse with a human being moving boxes on a conveyor, something's changed. Something's variable. So if you got a human standing up at a merge and they're sitting there and you ask the question, what's going on? Something's too rigid. Something's changed. A box size has been introduced because the orders got bigger or smaller or something. So when you see humans doing work on a conveyor that's a conveyor's designed to do, there's your sign.
So, when volume fluctuates sharply, what tends to get exposed first besides that sign there? Is it slotting strategy, travel time, congestion, something else?
I can hit this one, Chip, and then you can add in. I think you see it show up and it manifests itself in a couple of different ways. I think one, quality goes down. So the orders going out the door to your customer, you probably get that most real time feedback as if when you're under stress and there's too much volume or something's changed and you don't have a solid process or operating system, you're going to see quality. You're going to see quality out to the customer. Sometimes you're going to see inventory, your inventory, your location accuracy, your inventory not being what it should be. So you're going to see drops in inventory. You'll see drops in quality. And then I think you'll just see a lot of congestion. You'll see stress leaders. You'll see operational people on the floor. We have a lot of empathy for people that work on the floor because we call ourselves concrete walkers sometimes. Marys, we spend a lot of time out on the floor, and like those are the people in hot environments on their feet all day. And then you've got an operations leader that's trying to do everything of people management while meeting SLAs. You'll see a lot of stress and congestion is what I would say.
Yeah, I think back to Jim's point a little earlier, you see a lot of just manual workarounds, right? See a lot of tape on the floor, location labels applied to the floor, people on top of each other from a congestion standpoint, trying to get MHE in there from a replan while you're picking. Just kind of see, as we would always say, in the battle, operational engineering, right? You're taking stacks of pallets, putting a slip sheet on it. That's a workstation. start backing orders, right? Some of that good old school figure it out as you go kind of thing. And so those are the big telltale signs, right? Is you just start seeing these in the moment operational innovations that you got to react and be able to still make service while you get hit with this volume. And so, sometimes you just got to figure it out in the heat of battle and roll from there.
So, as you're walking through and looking at those innovations, as we'll call them, how do you assess whether an operation can scale up and down without breaking throughput targets?
Yeah, I mean it's tough, right? Because at the end of the day, there's always some kind of constraint, and that's something I always like to call there's a break point, right? Whether it's a conveyor system, a robotic system, even a manual environment, you can only have so many pieces of equipment in an aisle. We really try to identify those break points. When does this just not work, or what can it really? When can it still operate and be efficient, but still handle the volume? And so I, I think it's tough to figure those out, right? Because you do get those operational innovations as you go forward, but yeah, it just really comes down to design how you operate and make sure you're clear to your customer internally and externally of what you're able to do, and still maintain good quality to what Jim hit on earlier.
Yeah, and I like to think of this. I think to put back to people, I think it's a story with like when you design a car or a truck, it has certain limits. So the engine's a certain size, it has a certain payload it can haul. That's a lot like a more static system, a conveyor system, a racking system. You've got certain amounts of throughput and capacity. Period. Sometimes you can drive that car above its speed limit or that truck above its speed limit. You can maybe go and haul to the type or to the height of its load and its capacity, but it's got capacities. And if you didn't design it right, it's static. That's all it can do. Versus there are other systems and technologies. Again, we're on Locus with you. As Locus is one, is like, okay, well, you just add additional Locus spots in, you add additional capacity in. So I think it's all important. And we had those conversations with our customers of how one of your earlier questions were like, in your industry, you need to have more flexibility. If you're retail, if you're e-com, if you're direct to consumer, if you're a new startup, you need that flexibility built in. And so we guide and advise. And one of our brand promises is guide intelligent change. And we really have to do that with some customers because they're fixed versus flexible, static versus dynamic. They're real situations that our customers are seeing. And so that's what we help guide them through and advise them through.
What does flexibility actually look like on the floor? Is it more about physical layout, process design, the labor model, or is it the interaction between all of them?
Yeah, it's the interaction between all of them is really where it's at, right? I'm a big fan of software and what software can do from a flexibility standpoint. How can you pick differently versus with different volumes that come in, different SKU sets that are driving that volume? I think that's very key from a flexibility standpoint is having good software that can help you in that decision, whether it's your WMS or a WES that can really execute and adjust as you need to on an operational day-to-day standpoint. It's on the labor workforce, right? As we kind of hit on earlier, is you have your typical base count of a permanent employee workforce, but having good temp relations, how do you get them in? How do you make sure your operation is able to get them in and train them quick and get productivity from them, right? Because just having them there doesn't do you any good. You got to get good production out of them. Another thing of flexibility I don't think some people think about is really being able to handle different product sizes. As we talked about earlier, as a customer's growing, how are they growing? As Jim hit on earlier, there's customers we dealt with that started with really small undergarments and now do slippers and big duvet robes and stuff like that. And you just got to catch, right? You got to be able to take it, right? The warehouse doesn't get much say in how the marketing team grows the business. And so you got to be able to adapt as it's coming at you. And so flexibility is a simple word. It's a hard solution in really making sure you account for how things can change, what can change. Again, you're always going to have breakpoints and things that you can't do, but to give as wide a range as possible and still be able to do it in a cost efficient manner is really the key to flexibility, and something that we put a lot of thought into, especially when choosing different systems and choosing different things, is educating our customer, as Jim said, guiding that intelligent change of, hey, if you want to go here, you might lose all flexibility, but you might get really good productivity. Vice versa. We might give you a lot of flexibility, but you might lose a little bit on the productivity side. Where is that happy medium of what you all think you're going to be as a business and what it's going to happen to your business? Now, no one knows for sure, but having some of those levers you can pull to adapt and react is key to make sure you're at least getting as much you can out of the investment.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That flexibility is a simple word. Quote Chip is spot on, and all we can do, Mary, is put good people in a room with good partners like you all, and ultimately help customers and educate them and advise them and guide them the best way we can, and give them different options. And nothing in this industry is easy. If anybody's been in it any amount of time, it's like you have to be flexible, you have to be dynamic, and you have to have people and partners that are willing to help customers that need that. Because Chip nailed it. Flexibility is a simple word.
So, when companies are working with Zion Solutions Group to evaluate their redesign or their automation strategies, what operational trade offs are they wrestling with most? And how do you help them with those?
Yeah, I mean, they're wrestling with the same thing. Number one is capital. It can be hard to come depending on interest rates and what's going on. Also, to Jim's point, tariffs. You're consuming capital and paying tariffs versus consuming capital by improving your operation. So I think the main trade off is capital, and then what's that return on investment for that capital, right? And it all really depends on the size of the organization. Or some of our partners are massive organizations, and they have really savvy finance and procurement teams, and they'll say, hey, if I can't get a 2-year payback, I can put this money in a stock market and make more money than what it's going to give me from an operational standpoint. And so I think the hardest thing to come by is really, or from a trade off standpoint, is what do we do with that capital versus, hey, you can always go get more people. That's what they always get told. That's what I always say. As we talk, the labor market's gotten a little bit easier to get those people in versus where we were at during COVID. And so, hey, the other thing too, I always laugh on the trade offs or how do we get this approved is everyone's like, well, we keep making service. I tell them, well, you're not going to drive a need until you fail, but you can't fail. So how do you tell that story, right? How do you convince that leader that give me the capital before I fail? Because if I fail, we're all going to fail, and I don't want to fail. And so I think some of the trade-offs is being able to get that capital from overall organizational standpoint versus being able to react quicker from a labor and space standpoint. So it's a very hard solution to solve depending on the size of the company and what their priorities are from a business standpoint.
Yeah, and I think from the C-suite down and in the operational decision makers, Mary, they're looking at as levers, right? So you got space, you got service, you got people and labor, you've got systems, and then they're all trying to manage the risk associated with those 3 or 4 levers and how they pull them. And there's different combinations to pull the levers at. But how do you manage the risk to their business or to their customer or to their product? And then how do you balance against their return on that investment to pull those 3 or 4 levers? So I think Chip said it really well.
Have you seen cases where designing for warehouse flexibility helped an operation absorb an unexpected demand shift?
I think absolutely, Chip. We've all got those where you built it for one thing and it outperformed what you built it for, and you unknowingly or knowingly, very calculated and intentionally put in the ability to flex up. So one, Chip and I both have worked together a long time. We haven't always worked at Zion together. We worked at other places in our careers together, and some of the best operations we've designed and worked in, they started with one focus, and we built a really simple, user-friendly, labor-friendly system, and we watched it scale. And then we've been on the other end of that as well, Mary, where we built what we thought was right, and the customer gave us all the inputs, and then their business totally shifted. But they built for a truck, and what they really needed was a car. They needed a minivan, and they bought a truck, and yet they needed a minivan. Absolutely. Now I'll let Chip.
It all comes back to that original design, right? And thinking about we've been in some operations where we set up and I'll brag on Locus a little bit here. We set up kind of a simpler overall design because that customer was very honest of this is where I'm at. I think I'm where I'm going to go, but it might hit me sooner than later. And I think one thing everyone knows from a marketing standpoint, social media is massive in the marketing world these days. And so you get the right brand posts on Instagram or TikTok, and you better start catching because everyone's going to start ordering. And so we've had some definite operations where Locust specifically was able to come in and get some bots on site in a couple of weeks to really grow and meet the demand. Not only helped our customer, but then helped them with their customer. And it was a massive win across the board because that brand was not very well known until a couple posts later. And it became the hottest thing, you can get your hands on. And so they were still able to react, delight their customers, because of the flexibility that we have with the Locus solution, and still also do it in a productive manner. There's times to get volume out where you're quadrupling your workforce only to meet double the volume. Well, that's not a good economic trade-off there, right? And so still being able to do it in a linear fashion from a cost and throughput standpoint was massive in the overall success of that.
So, for a warehouse leader who feels their facility was built for a different era of demand, where should they start operationally besides calling Zion Solutions Group?
Yeah, I think it's just understanding what is your current state, right? That's usually a key. It's just understanding where you're at. Sometimes, especially depending on what level of operation you're talking about, they don't have time to sit there and think about what's really going on. They're catching and trying to get it done. And so I think just having time and sitting there and taking a moment to think of what's going on, what are our challenges on a daily basis, working internally with their organization, marketing, what are you all doing? What do you all see? What are you hearing from customers? Or product development? Are you all making something new I don't even know about? Maybe it's a merger and acquisition. Who knows what that is going to continue that growth. But I think the key thing for an operator is just to understand what they're doing today, what's working, what's not working, why, and then really bring in their own internal partners of what could we do differently, right? Is there system changes we can make in the way we're flowing things? Is there order demands we can make in our sales team? Hey, sales, we're going to mandate case quantities. So no one can order 2, 3, 4. They got to order 6. That's going to help me out in the warehouse. I get 6 every time. I can pull cases versus doing a whole bunch of unit picks and getting that stuff out. And so I think it's working internally, understanding where they're at, what things can they control within that kind of system and orders standpoint and product development standpoint. And then, all right, what do we need to do in the warehouse to catch or adjust to that? I think is key in those situations.
I'm always the analogy guy, Mary. So there's some decision making frameworks or problem solving frameworks. This is a pretty simple model, but operators can go out and look and say, what do they need to keep doing? What should they start doing? What should they stop doing? And maybe what should they do more of? And just a real easy 4-way matrix of looking at that. But I think the challenge a lot of times is they're trying to change the tires driving down the road. So they got an operation to run. They still have to make service. They have to show up. They got people every day. So that's where your internal support functions like Chip came in. It's good to get a fresh set of eyes on it because somebody has to do that discovery process. Nobody knows the operations better than the operators, but sometimes that's a challenge because you know it so well, you can't see the problems. You don't see the path forward. You know something's not wrong, but to get to that true root cause analysis, you need an outside party. You need your internal partners. You need a fresh set of eyes. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Obviously, as an integrator, we do that in our discovery process. We're glad to do it, but if it doesn't have to always be an integrator. It could be your internal support functions. It could be somebody outside of the operations. And then a secret power, I'd tell you, is the employees always know. Go talk to the employees. The guy doing the job, they'll tell you. The lady doing the job, that was one of my secrets when I was out on the concrete and working with teams is like the leaders always think they know. The front office always thinks they know. The executives we all think we know, but the people doing the work, they really know. So go spend a week in the operation. When we started with Chip, when we worked together previously, we had a lot of co-ops. And the first week or two, I'd send them into the operation. You want to really learn how to be an engineer? Go do the work, then come back. So maybe somebody out there hears that. I'm full of analogies, but like you really want to know, go ask the people on the floor doing the job. They'll tell you.
Yeah, or just sit in the break room and listen to the stories as everyone sit up. You get the full uncut story there. You get some good personal stories, and you'll get the operational stories. You get your 30 minutes to an hour in there, and just listen up and start taking some notes. You'll know who's doing what within that warehouse.
That is great advice. I love that. So, one last question. Looking ahead, what do you think flexible design will need to accommodate over the next 5 years?
I think it's really case by case, right? As we talked about, flexible is an easy word, but where do you need it? Where is the value in the flexibility? Is it going to be more of product size? Is it going to be more, hey, we need more flexibility in throughput? Hey, we need more flexibility in storage or those trade offs? And so I think it's just really, you can't be super flexible, right? Or else you're just running really a manual environment because that's the most flexible operation there is because you're walking around pig carts and different stuff like that. But it's not efficient. It's not cost effective for the most part, typically, right? So I think when you talk about flexibility in the next 5 years, it's like where for your company or for your operation, where do you need flexibility the most? And where can you be a little bit more less flexible as well? Because there's going to be trade offs of it, right? There's warehouses don't have unlimited space. And so if you spread across the floor, I'm going to lose storage flexibility. But I did that because I need my productivity to stay up from a picking standpoint. So it's always going to be these trade offs of flexibility value by those areas, and you got to rank them because you don't have unlimited flexibility. It's just not a real thing. People will tell you that, and they'll say we're flexible and all that, but there's limits to it, right? And you just got to be honest with yourself, or what we try to be with our customers. Of we give you flexibility here, but you're going to lose it on this side, right? Or vice versa. So we got to work with you guys to understand what's the most important flexibility, and then we can be a little bit more precise on other stuff around it.
I would break it into two categories. From a space standpoint, I think that equation's a little easier. That problem's a little easier to solve in terms of flexibility. In terms of how you're storing product, in the labor component, it's still pretty simple. Go to your largest areas of your labor. What are the most critical components of your operation? And then you got to decide the rigidity or the flexibility that you want to put in place. And then you got to work with partners and people, technology providers that you don't. Everybody says they want to be everything to everybody, but there's power in saying no, and there's power in understanding where your product solves a problem. And so at Zion, what we do, and part of that guide and intelligent change is our brand promise, is we work with a bunch of different partners and we know what they do best. And then we can help solve those areas of flexibility.
So thank you to Jim and Chip for the thoughtful discussion today. Much appreciated. I'm glad you both were able to join.
Yeah, no, appreciate the time. As always, I think we really enjoy the partnership with Locus that we get from you guys. Really, we believe a lot of your all's beliefs and principles match what we believe at Zion, and how we want to interact with our customers and what we try to provide to our customers. So it's great to have a partner that aligns on those values, and we can really collaborate with, but not only from current projects and current technologies, but as new technologies come out from you guys, and we help work together of how to use it and where it can really apply and help our customers in the warehouse. And so it's a great partnership, and really appreciate the time today and the opportunity to be on here.
We appreciate you as well. And thank you as always to our listeners. When operational confidence is the goal, designing for adaptability is the pathway, and we'll continue bringing you conversations that help you move forward with clarity.